Hi there, it's Graham Healy again. Now, I've just thought of another subject, which I've got plenty of subjects to talk about. So, um, traditional Taekwondo versus tournament Taekwondo, or where Taekwondo has evolved in today's world. Now, are they effective as self-defense, the tournament Taekwondo versus the traditional Taekwondo? When I say traditional Taekwondo, let me take you on a little journey. Those of you who may be a bit new to Taekwondo and its variations, a little bit of my background, apart from the boxing background that I've got, which you can have a look on my website, yunjundohealy.com or commandocravmagaaustralia.com. Or you can go to Healy's Health and look at Bert Healy's boxing history. I come from a boxing family. My father just recently passed away, but we were supporters and still are the supporters of the Boxing Hall of Fame. And so back to the subject, traditional Taekwondo versus tournament Taekwondo. So what is traditional Taekwondo? Well, I can speak with a little bit of authority there because I'm one of the second generations Taekwondo instructors in Australia. The first two Taekwondo masters from General Choi's camp. Who is General Choi, for those who don't know? General Choi was the founder of modern-day Taekwondo in Korea, and he was a general in the Korean Army, of course, and he established Taekwondo. He did it. I think he was a second degree in Shotokan karate, got imprisoned by the Japs for a while, and learned karate in that prison cell, and then adopted karate, basically the upper body part of karate, to Tae Kwon, which is the foot fighting art of the Koreans. The Koreans are very good with their feet, as you can see in any of the videos you see done by Koreans. Their execution of feet techniques or foot techniques, hand-foot fighting or hand-foot techniques, is absolutely phenomenal. And getting back to the history, so there were two masters that came out from Korea to Australia. One was Grandmaster Chong Chul Ri and his two brothers, Chong Yip and Chong Yoon Ri. I've met all three. I actually trained under Chong Chul Ri for about 7 years, and I was a senior instructor under Chong Chul. I resigned from Chong Chul and joined Grandmaster Yun. He was the other Korean instructor that was actually fully endorsed by General Choi, Grandmaster Yun Kyu-yun, who I joined the International Taekwondo Federation under him. I also joined the Master Yun International Taekwondo Federation. He was the Grand Master in charge of the whole South Pacific under the auspices of the International Taekwondo Federation when General Choi was fully active. Grandmaster Yun brought General Choi to Australia. I think it was 1975. You can check on my website. We've got Grandmaster Yun doing a side kick, and General Choi sort of holding the kick in place, sort of thing, or underneath his hand. A classic move in front of the Opera House. So you can see that photograph on my website. Now, that generation, I'm talking the generation of General Choi, Grandmaster Yun, Park Jun Tae, Ri Kia, Jun Ri, that generation, they're all military, all right? And they were actively either involved in, say, for instance, the Vietnam War, Korean War, whatever. But these guys, including Grandmaster Yun, military service in Korea is sort of compulsory, I believe. But these guys came out of a military-based system. So in other words, they weren't mucking around. They weren't doing martial art for sport. I can remember Chong Chul. I had a lot of great conversations with Chong Chul. I mean, some of his instructors question mark that I had issues with in the old days, but Chong Chul himself was always pretty good with me. And, he would always say that, Taekwondo is a martial art and not a sport. Now, Chong Chul was part of the Demon Hunter Brigade. He was a commando, pretty serious one at that. And I've seen him, stand people up that want to challenge the master. And, a friend of mine, my former wife, before she passed away, was great friends with the people who own Chinatown in Sydney, and Ronald Wong is one of the brothers there that I know quite well. He was a great mate of Chong Chul's, and seeing Chong Chul in some action, real action in the street, and he's everything he says he is. So that generation of martial arts master and the likes of these masters, including Grandmaster Yun, they're all about the one-hit strikes. They, didn't complicate anything because they knew as combat soldiers, one mistake and you're dead. So, you might say to me, okay, what's the difference between traditional and tournament Taekwondo? Well, there's a world of difference. There's a whole different focus. Now, Chong Chul's got his stories, and I can tell you a few of those, but I won't go into those there. I'll tell you that privately. And Grandmaster Yun also, when he was in the Korean Army, the Americans were there on base. And one of the American boxers, a Negro American boxer, challenged Grandmaster Yun. Grandmaster Yun's like 5 foot nothing. He's quite thick set, but he's very short, right? So this big dude challenged him. And that was the days, I think, Chuck Norris and was just starting to learn Taekwondo when he was over there in the American Air Force. But Grandmaster Yun ran a whole division of soldiers on the American military base there, and this boxer challenged him. Anyway, the American boxer, typical American, I'm not saying this about all Americans, but, I was in the airlines for 10 years, been all around the world. And some of the tourists or some of the soldiers and that, they're pretty, loud about what they claim they can do and can't do. And so this American soldier called out Grandmaster Yun in front of everyone, reckons he was going to kill him. Of course, Grandmaster Yun responded and said, well, you killed me, maybe I kill you. So what happened after that was the Grandmaster Yun, this guy shaped up, threw a punch or whatever, and Grandmaster Yun did 2 kicks on him. One low, spinning heel kick to the temple, almost killed the guy, and that guy was in hospital for 3 months afterwards. And the Grandmaster said to me he thought he killed him on the spot. And afterwards, of course, the officer in charge made an inquiry, called Grandmaster Yun into the office and found out that, yes, he was challenged and that it was the USA soldiers' fault, that he deserved everything he got. They were sending him back to the US. That was the end of his military service. And the commander-in-chief there commanded all the American soldiers to salute Grandmaster Yun when they walked past. They recognized him as a true warrior, true soldier. So that's the generation that taught me. And apart from my father and my grandfather, Dad was Queensland State Boxing Champion in 1948, and my grandfather was a professional boxing coach, and he was a horse trainer as well. He used to train horses and boxers, very similar in nature. He had his boxing team, would do anything that he said in a positive sense, and his horses were the same. They were great. I used to ride horses there up in Cairns near Gordonvale all the time. Anyway, where has Taekwondo evolved? Well, the traditional masters such as Grandmaster Yun, Chong Chul Ri, Rikiar's over in I think Ireland still, he's still alive. The ones that are still alive, which there's a couple of them left, they're all military. They believe in the one-hit strikes. They don't entertain tournaments at all. General Choi went down the line of tournaments before he passed away because he just wanted to make it more popular or something, get it into the Olympic Games, I think his objective was. And he had this meeting with Grandmaster Yun, And Grandmaster Yun said, no. He said, this is not what martial arts is all about. And therefore, Grandmaster Yun resigned from the ITF probably, I think it was about 1989, 1988. And he formed Yun Jun Do. And Yun Jun Do really was a refined version of Taekwondo. He took out all the miscellaneous, what I call useless techniques in the old ITF patterns, which weren't really designed for function. I mean, you're doing a W blocks against flying kicks and stuff like that. It's just ridiculous. You couldn't stop a flying kick with that. But those patterns, the original ITF patterns, were designed on General Choi's calligraphy. He was quite a historian, and he always believed in the unification of North and South Korea and what have you. And so he wrote the whole patterns in the original Taekwondo, the first generation Taekwondo. He wrote that the patterns themselves, when you actually did a pattern, you actually traced out a Korean character by your footwork. Now, pretty good in a way, but from a practical point of view, they were just making up stuff as they went, quite frankly. And as Grandmaster Yun said to me, they couldn't remember half the stuff. I mean, I think they went to North Korea, and then Grandmaster Choi, or Cho, some people call him Choi, I always call him General Choi. Because I went over to North Korea, he made another pattern up in honor of the North Korean president. A lot of this stuff goes on in the Orient. It's all a pecking order. So getting back to the main theme, what I'm talking about, traditional Taekwondo versus tournament Taekwondo. So where is the tournament Taekwondo? Well, it's sort of gone into this slappy, there's no heel focus with spinning kicks and all this, and it's all, points focused. And you'll notice that, well, I notice, I don't know about anyone else knows, but I've only been training for well over 50 years, so maybe I can see what others can't. But when I notice the Taekwondo tournament stuff, they're always open straight down the midline. No groin kicks, no punches, just a whole lot of, and the kicks are good. Look, tornado kicks and all that, they look good, but in the real world, you just sidestep or step away from them, and when they come down, you hammer them then. But so traditional versus tournament. Why am I, at the age of 67, don't want anything to do with tournaments? Because I'm frightened of tournaments? No, I'm not. I'm an ex-competitive boxer. I've had many conflicts. Not voluntarily, many conflicts on the street, including disarming robberies with criminals with shotguns. So I've been in the real world. Forget the tournament stuff. I know what it's like to deal with when you're trying to save your own life, and so does my other assistant instructors my other cohort, Rob Phillips, who ex-army, taught the SAS. He's dealt with armed defence in the real world as well. So there's a vast difference between reality-based training and sport-based training. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that I actually agree with my, two previous grandmasters, Grandmaster Chong Chul Ri and his brothers, and of course Grandmaster Yun, who I'm still continuing on the legacy of Grandmaster Yun. I agree with both of them that sport Taekwondo really has no place in the traditional Taekwondo sense, because here's a couple of reasons. All right. One, when you're competing, I don't know if there's any parents listening to this. Do you want your kids kicked in the head? How about a spinning heel kick in the head? How would that go down? I've done 6 years of medical science. I run a musculoskeletal business, and I'm telling you, the last thing you want is someone kicked in the head. And it's not necessary to prove or to develop technique either. You can use a focus mitt. As my father always said, Never let anyone use you as a punching bag. So you've got these young people that have been pushed into the ring, and they're jumping around, kicking everyone everywhere. I saw one the other day where some girl just kicked someone in the throat. I mean, for God's sake, is that a sport? The trouble is, at the end of the day, the intensity of a technique in real self-defense, and when I say that, I mean, some people say, oh, yeah, what about real self-defense? Well, I know what real self-defense is all about. I've had to use it a lot of times. I've taught prison wardens, police, and army. Ask some of the soldiers what real self-defense is all about. Admittedly, they have weapons, but if they get into a man-to-man combat, well, they've got their, battle knife or something. Real self-defense means that you've got to finish the conflict as quick as possible. It's not about tournament score. So what happens when you train to tournaments, you become that person. In other words, you really inherit bad habits as far as I can see. So, the intensity or the focus of one-hit strikes, that's thrown out the door, and you do all this rapid stuff. You have to kick, kick. Here, the focus little all that. To me, it's ridiculous. And the other thing is, it creates a competitive atmosphere in your class. So then you've got what I call this pecking order competitive atmosphere if you're focused on tournaments. Now, I've been a boxer and I fought professional fighters. If you can keep an attitude of, after a bloke has maybe knocked you out, or maybe broken your jaw, or knocked your teeth out, and you go, oh, that's all right, mate, thanks very much for that. Oh, we'll see you next fight. If you can keep an attitude of, that's okay, it's according to the rules. Or you have a look at the MMA or the UFC or the cage fighting, and someone's there pounding and grounding you in the head. Oh, that's okay, mate. It's all part of the game. Thanks very much for that. I mean, if you're that sort of person who thinks that's okay, I mean, unless you're being paid a lot of money like the professionals are for the entertainment of the crowd, then what we do at Untitled Healy isn't for you. We're not doing that. I don't want any of my students bashed, but they learn the traditional way to counter attacks. And that's basically like a steel trap. So, as my grandfather said in the boxing days when I asked him, what's the best punch in the book? And he had this really gruff voice. Yeah, okay. He'd speak something like out of a Rocky movie, right? And he said, I asked him, Granddad, I was about 14 doing boxing training at his gym in Gordonvale near Cairns. What's the best punch in the book? It's the best punch in the book, son. It's the first one. And I've watched him, a lady told me, I had a milk run in Townsville for a while, and I went to a shop, and the lady says, is your grandfather Bert Healy? I said, yeah, what's he done now? I kid you not, that's what I said, because I knew what my grandfather was like. Well, she said, we were at the races the other day, and some young bloke challenged him, and your grandfather just knocked him straight out with a big right hand. And I said to the lady, I said, I know what my grandfather's like. I've seen a horse bite someone, and Granddad's whacked the horse with a right hand and pulled it back. So that's the reality of, you take either boxing or you take traditional Taekwondo into the real world, and that's what you'll get. You'll get the likes of, say, like Grandmaster Chong Chul-ri, Grandmaster Yun, Jun-ri, all these guys that are right out of the military academy in the first generation. No, they're not mucking around. They just take you out. So when you're training that sort of focus, and you can do all that in the bags and shields and all that sort of stuff, but when it comes to your training partner, you're very, very careful. In other words, everything's slow-mo, everything's controlled, etc. Because one mistake you can open someone up. Like, for instance, I brought Monty Isaac out here. I was the national director of Commando Krav Maga there in 2007, 2008. And we were practicing in the class one day. This is when I had another commando class I was running. And there was a young bloke there, and I said, look, be very careful. There was a technique we were using, it was like a basic knife defense technique. And you'd come across with a stiff arm, boom, like this. And I said, be very careful you go to the top of their head. I said, because if you don't, I said, there's going to be damage. Anyway, he didn't go to the top of the head. He hit one of my senior students straight in the eyebrow. Just opened him up, 3 or 4 stitches across the eye, and he didn't hit him hard. So, we understood that. Vince said to me, no worries, mate, you've got the eye stitched and all this sort of thing. So I'm super careful about safety in classes. So, if you're talking full contact, you're going to talk a lot of injuries, I'm telling you. And if you're a kickboxer, MMA professional, and you want to do that in the ring, that's great. It's not what I'm doing at Jung Healy. It's not what the traditional guys did either. The traditional guys did a lot of Makawama board training. They did a whole lot of heavy training, and then in reality, they just didn't hold back. As a matter of fact, if the famous or infamous Tiger Division in the Korean Army participated in the Vietnam War, and that division, even though they were armed, they had side guns and all this sort of stuff, they never, ever, or rarely used them. They took out the enemy by their bare hands. And I'm telling you, it was frightening what they did. And that's traditional Taekwondo. Now, the other factor I didn't cover there is the attitude and the atmosphere. So, as I left Taekwondo, I was one of the founding instructors of Untitled, which is, Grandmaster Jung was one of the founding instructors or the pioneers of Taekwondo. He formed his own art, which is Untitled. I was one of the founding instructors of that, bit like he was with General Choi in the beginning. So what's the difference between traditional? I think I've explained that well enough. And sport. The sport it's a bunch of rules which doesn't apply on the street. All right. And what I noticed with the sport Taekwondo, they're totally open right down the center. So, they're open to front kicks straight down the center. They're open to punches and that. You get in the real world, and that's what will be happening to them. There won't be any sort of jumping around, spinning everywhere. You can do that for a demonstration, I suppose, but step back and then hammer them after that. So, or if you're a good puncher, bang, you let them in first. And as Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And that's true, because the first one will determine what happens from there. In the real world, the first technique is the determiner of what happens from there. Doesn't matter how good someone is. They could be the champion of everything. And then bang, you hit them in the right spot, very quick and fast, and they're dazed. That's when they're gone. So that's real self-defense as versus sport, where you're stepping in there with a bunch of rules to allow someone to use you as a punching bag. Now, I did that when I was a boxer, but boxing was actually when I was boxing, it was all very controlled. Our gym didn't go overboard. We did a lot of light sparring, sometimes got a bit heavy, had mouth guards in and all that. And the only time we went full on was actually in the ring. And that was full on. You're trying to knock out the opponent or at least beat them on points. Different ball game. But in the sparring side of things, we're always fairly light and friendly. I mean, it got a bit heavy sometimes when someone's leading up to a fight, but very controlled. It was very controlled. All my memories, and I've done thousands of rounds of sparring, all the state champions, Queensland state champions, I've sparred all of them back in the 70s and 80s, 70s mainly. We're all still great mates, So there's a different mindset there. We were conditioning each other, made certain no one got injured in the ring. Right, okay, we're going to beat this guy, right? And you sort of had to throw all the courtesies out the door, but still sportsmanlike at least. So when you talk about martial arts, the traditional martial art is all about character building, and when we've evolved into Healy, that's my branded name, and I've also got that trademarked as well. But my focus is to teach people the techniques that I know and learn, and I know that works, to teach them the power and how to execute techniques on focus shields and mitts, but to keep everyone safe. So that means that in my class, the whole family can train together without getting hurt. And as they get up the levels, their precision and their accuracy and power just gets better and better and better. I mean, I'm 67, been training 50 years. So I still do all the same stuff, a refined version of it. And I merge in all the stuff I know. So I teach the students how to check kicks and all the rest of it. So at the end of the day, I think I want to finish on this. The evolution that I've gone to, where I've gone to Yunjin Healy, I mean, I've left ITF. I'm not happy with any tournament stuff. Good luck to those people doing tournaments. And if you get injuries, you can come and see me as a musculoskeletal therapist. I might do a bit of dry needling on you, try and fix you up. And unless you're getting paid for it, you're taking a big risk. That's my opinion, right? The traditional / character building side of martial arts, which we're into, is you do all the positive techniques. In other words, you do all the self-defense stuff. You do all the releasing from chokeholds, et cetera, et cetera. You learn all the kicks. You learn all the dynamics of it. And you learn all the stretching, which what I do is rehabilitation stretching. You learn all that without getting hurt. You know, people in my class range from 13 through to I'm 67. So I don't want to go home. I work a property as well. I've got a property where I don't want to hobbling up the property there, trying to clear the land there when I've got an injury in my knee from some kickboxer kicking me in the thigh or something. You know, I don't need that at my age. I don't think you need that at any age. Maybe if you're 20 or something, you want to test yourself out, go and do a bit of kickboxing or a bit of boxing. I'd recommend first up. But the future of tournament fighting for people, I don't think that you can't last long in that environment. The competitive environment is by nature destructive. You know, I'm the best. I'll beat you up. You know, big deal. Take you out in the street and see how you go. I've had a lot of those guys sort of say that to me, and they got the biggest surprise in their little book, and they find out that doesn't work in the real world, does it? You know, the guys who know this, they know that. The guys who've been in prison wardens, bouncers, all this, so they know that. They've heard it all their life until they give someone the slap in the ear or something, you know. So I think it comes down to this, you know, and I said traditional Taekwondo versus tournament Taekwondo. I'm not into the tournament Taekwondo, never have been. And the reason why I'm in the traditional style of things without necessarily being, you know, technique traditional, I'm actually evolved further out of that over the last 50 years into where, you know, I was a founding instructor for Yunjin, and I've called it Yunjin Healy, which is my registered business name. And actually all that I've learned over the years, I've merged that in so that my students will learn the whole lot. They'll learn how to get off the floor with grappling and all that. They'll learn how to, if a kickboxer goes, how to check that kick and counter it. They'll learn, if from a boxing point of view, how to counter a straight left and a right cross without getting hurt, minimize getting hurt anyhow. So learn all those things. That's on one side, the physical side. But then the spiritual side, the character building side, is by doing discipline, stretching, martial arts training without getting hurt, it gives you confidence. You need to learn first before you have confidence. You know, I'll just give you a little example. I mean, when I fought the main event at the PCYC at one point against a ring-in fighter who was a professional. I was still amateur, and he was a tough guy. I knew he was. I thought, God, I'm in for it here. And he, down in the dressing room, he continually repeated, and he was about 10 years older than me. I was only 19, you know. And he said, I'm going to kill you, boy. I'm going to kill you, boy. He kept saying to me. And I remember looking at him, I was nervous, and the thought patterns that are in my head were, well, my grandfather has taught me. He's a pro fighter and trainer. My father's Queensland state champ. Dad spent a lot of time with me. I was trained to the minute. And I thought to myself, we'll see how you go. And I remember why he didn't intimidate me. I was cautious. He didn't intimidate me because of my background. I knew that I'd handled a lot of these. I was the main sparring partner for all the state champs. So I knew I could take it to that level. And I knew he was tough. But what gave me the confidence was the training that I'd done in the background, including the sprint training in the mornings and all that. I knew, don't care what he said, I was ready to take on anyone. And it was one of the best fights I ever saw there, apparently. Plenty of action, I'll tell you. I knocked him out in the second round with what they call an upset punch. One of these ones comes up that way, so you whack them this way. Anyway, that's a few years ago now. But he did headbutt me, of course, a few things happened. But at the end of the day, the point I'm getting to is this, that why I had that confidence was of all the training that I did. It wasn't necessarily that I had a whole lot of fights, which I didn't. I had a lot of training. I had a lot of technique training. And in martial arts, the real martial art, there's no rules. Real self-defense, there isn't any rules. There isn't a referee, and there isn't an ambulance guy in the corner, and there isn't a crowd cheering you on. There's a street, and then there's the hospital. That's about it. Street and hospital, that's the two options. And if you hit the street the wrong way, you'll be back in hospital in the ICU ward. So I'll just finish off on this. What I've tried to do is explain between traditional Taekwondo and sport Taekwondo, why I'm not doing tournaments and competition, not because I'm frightened of it. It's because I realise that it's just rules. I've been there and done that, got the T-shirt as a competitive boxer. And you take the gloves off a boxer, he's worried about his hands. Take the mouth guard. I remember when I started martial arts training, I felt very insecure with no wrap pads on my hands, the wraps on my hands, or my mouth guard in. You just felt naked. You weren't used to having no protective gear. That's another aspect, Anyway, here we go. So where's Jung Healy in this situation? We're an evolved process where I've absorbed all the good techniques I've learned over the last 50 years, and I teach it to the students in a family environment where everyone can learn self-defense without getting hurt. All of them, most of my students are mature age businessmen or businesswomen. One lady I have in at the class, she was a former figure skater. She got a fair few injuries with that. When she started my stretching, all these injuries disappeared. And one of the reasons, her name's Rachel, one of the reasons she joined my class was that she looked what all the others were doing, and some of her friends had joined martial arts, ? Come home all bruised, right? She didn't want to do that. Well, would your daughter want to do that? Come home with bruises everywhere? So she joined my martial art, Untitled Healy, because we had no competition, no contact, train at your own pace, mind, body, spirit, balance. So that's what we're doing. We're teaching you all the stuff, but you're not going into tournaments where people are bashing you. And the atmosphere is totally different. I'll tell you, first 15 minutes of my class is telling jokes. Why get too serious? After 50 years of training, I know what serious training is all about. So unless people are having fun, they're not going to enjoy it. So if you want to, if our sort of, I've tried to explain the difference between traditional Taekwondo and tournament Taekwondo, but now we've got Untitled Healy, which is basically you're learning all the skills and drills of like the world champions. From that perspective, but it's focused on reality self-defense. So, you know, that's a whole different mindset. It's a whole different ball game. Plus, when you have no contact, no competition, sure, we're using focus mitts and all that sort of stuff. You learn the skills and drills, but in the hope that you'll never need them. And if you do need them, you'll know how to do it 1, 2, 3 very quickly, as I've done many times, and show people how it's done. And they, oh God, well, you wouldn't do that, would you? I said, well, yes, if they're bigger, stronger, you do this. So the real martial arts dudes out there, they know what I'm talking about. You have a look at some of the kung fu guys. Like, I just think of one, Grandmaster William Chung down in Sydney, you know, fair dinkum. You know, if he used one Wing Chun technique on you, bang, you're in hospital. That's that generation. That's Grandmaster Yun's generation. That's Grandmaster Chong Chul Ree's generation. That's my generation, actually. So from a self-defense point of view, just repeat that again. It's all about one-hit strikes, but you back it up with a hell of a lot of training. So just get this picture at the end of the day. Just imagine you're a samurai and you're sharpening the sword all the time. Now, when the samurai draws that sword, someone is going down, and it won't be him. So that's from the physical point of view. Then the other thing we've got to look at is atmosphere and training. If it's competitive, it's negative. Doesn't matter what you say. Someone is always trying to beat someone in a competitive scenario. Or someone gives someone a kick in the head and you go, oh, thanks very much, mate, for that. You just broke my jaw. Thank you very much for that. You're going to say that? I don't think so. So the competitive atmosphere is always destructive generally, but a family atmosphere with no competition is building up. You're building up people's character. You know, you're doing the techniques and having a great time while you're doing it. No one's getting too deadly competitive serious. That's how I run my club. But that sort of fits you. Down there are links to book a call to have a chat with me. You can bring your family and friends. I mean, I have whole families training with me. And, you know, we sort of go on an educational journey. My motivation really is to educate and motivate. I like watching people develop. And so that's Graham Healy over and out. Hope that was interesting, perhaps. And that you know the difference between traditional and sport, Taekwondo and what have you. If you want the injuries, go to the sport. You know, if you want to be a kickboxer, that's great. You don't fit into my organization. But if you want to learn all the skills and drills of martial arts and your family and that, and, you know, to keep them safe, anti-bullying, all that sort of thing, without getting hurt, and with learning proper rehabilitation, stretching, as I teach, having done 6 years of musculoskeletal university training, you want to learn that, well, I'm here to help you. Okay, Graham Healy over and out. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next video.